The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, two of NPR's weekend shows are merging. Find out what it means for It's Been a Minute and Wildcard from the hosts Brittany Luce and Rachel Martin. What secrets are contained in Lula Dean's little library of banned books? I'll talk with author Kirsten Miller to find out. Tucson and Mike Stark's new book is called Starlings The Curious Odyssey of a Most Hated Bird. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. All around the country this weekend, two NPR shows are combining into something new. Next, I talk with hosts Brittany Luce and Rachel Martin about how It's Been a Minute and Wildcard are coming together. We start by talking about their pitch process, and Brittany begins.
As far as the pitch process, my gosh, I'm like, as soon as you said that, I almost sighed because there are so many different ways that we put this show together as far as our ideas. To speak specifically on that process, a lot of what we cover on our show is really, we're all constantly scouring the news, but we're traditional sources. We're also on Twitch streams, playing video games, attending sporting events, watching movies, TV, looking at social media, the whole gamut, reading tons of books, just to try to draw connections and conclusions on what's happening in our culture and explore those on the show. Also, a lot of times too, we'll just have an experience where we're like in the drugstore and like, hey, I want to buy deodorant. Why is it locked up? Why is everything else I need locked up?
And then that can please answer that question. Yes.
We have. It turns out there's a whole lot more to it than we thought. But that's how a lot of things start on It's Been a Minute. Just like what's happening out in the world. What are people actually talking about? What matters to people? What's bothering us? What are we curious about? But as far as our shows combined, it's really about just like refining and really giving the most polished jewels over to our radio listeners, like just distilling each show down to what makes it, it's like, each show at its best, and giving that to the radio listeners.
It's a great partnership. Like you're going to get a curated version of IBAM of It's Been a Minute, and then you're going to hear a really compelling, hopefully personal, intimate conversation through Wildcard.
Well, next time somebody asks you about the process, tell them what I tell people, which is I consult the Sphinx.
Oh,
that's a good one.
The Sphinx, the all-knowing Sphinx.
Yes. Well, Rachel, you have a terrific mechanism built into your show with the questions on cards. I've always admired the show The Hot Ones because they have this great gimmick, if you will, that gets people to talk, and it's like truth serum. And I think sometimes the cards act as truth serum.
Well, thanks. I will be completely honest with you that it took a minute for me to buy into this idea. I'm a person who has spent a career interviewing people. And so the suggestion that I needed some kind of device to do that, I was like, what are you talking about? I know how to interview someone. And I thought it was going to feel restraining. Like, what? I can only ask these questions? But as we started to put it together, I was like, oh no, this is liberating because I don't know what's going to happen. There's an element of chance in all of it. It puts the guest off their talking points. They have to genuinely think because it's a question they've probably not been asked before. And then it makes me surrender some of my agency as the interviewer because I'm also subject to the questions. There's a built-in mechanism by which they can ask me to answer a question first.
Yeah, I wonder if that's ever put you in an interesting place. Have you ever found yourself kind of tasting your own medicine that way?
Oh, yeah. Completely. But I have to be prepared for that, right? Like if I'm going to ask someone else these really personal questions, then by God, I better be ready to answer them myself. And I sort of think it's only fair with a show like this where you're asking people to be so vulnerable and to share so much. Like I got to have my own skin in that game. And I find it really liberating in conversation, because then it actually does feel like a conversation, not an interview. In an interview, there's a power dynamic. I, the interviewer, have the power because I know the question I'm going to ask you and I don't have to be vulnerable. And this levels the playing field so that it genuinely feels like an actual back and forth, which is a more kind of authentic listening experience.
Brittany, one of the topics that you have featured on It's Been a Minute that really interested me was all the lonely people. And I wonder if you might have a word to say about that.
Yes, thank you so much for shouting out All the Lonely People. It's a series that we have recently been doing on It's Been a Minute, digging into this loneliness crisis that we see across our culture. We looked at loneliness in moms. We looked at the so-called men's loneliness epidemic or men's loneliness crisis. And we also looked at tech and loneliness. And it has been so eye-opening. I mean, there are so many things that we've talked about and dug into on this show that I've then later been able to immediately share with my own friends and family, but none quite like this one. It's interesting too because we have learned so much about the correlation between tech and loneliness. We've learned about why parents in general actually seem to experience loneliness more so than other adults, but also specifically moms feel lonelier than dads. We've dug into why that is, from the way our cities are structured, being reliant on car culture, to just these ever creeping higher and higher expectations for what we are expecting from mothers in our society, and then also, the lack of social safety net that often accompanies that. What's really blown my mind most about that specific series is how much we've seen the way that each of those segments has intersected with other segments that we've covered. Like about 2 years ago, I think we did a segment about AI companions, and I spoke with someone who had interviewed a bunch of people who had AI companions to varying results. I tried having an AI companion for a week. I will say, having a real
Really?
husband. Yeah, having a real husband, definitely I rate that higher than having an AI companion for a week that I got from an app. But I say all that to say that the ways in which tech can either moderate, improve, or exacerbate our loneliness, depending on how you use it, depending on where you're at as an individual. Like the ways in which that sometimes tech can intervene in our natural desire to communicate with each other just as human beings. It's really been mind-blowing. I just have felt all of these different callbacks to other segments that we've done, like the mom loneliness segment that we just did, and one that we did last year where we spoke with a researcher named Dr. Jessica Calarco, who wrote a book, where she posits that mothers are America's safety net. It's one of the most gratifying parts of hosting this show is there are constant callbacks to things that we've discussed before. So many of the biggest societal issues or biggest cultural shifts that we're seeing right now in our culture are interlocking, and it's really amazing to be reminded of that so often.
So if I could just add, like what is so exciting about this collaboration is that our producers are talking to each other all the time. And so if they know that It's Been a Minute is focusing on loneliness, then they will look through our wildcard archives and find the perfect conversation with a guest where a particular card, we have cards with questions on them that delve into the idea of loneliness, and for some people, does being alone fill you up or deplete you, and when have you felt most lonely? And so our producers are thinking in that direction. They're like, what can complement this amazing series that Brittany is doing on IBAM? What from Wildcard will really bring a different dimension to that? It's just going to elevate both of our shows to have them in collaboration, in partnership this way.
I spoke with NPR hosts Brittany Luce and Rachel Martin about how It's Been a Minute and Wildcard are becoming one. Locally, you can hear the new show this Sunday at 12 noon and at 8 p.m. on NPR 89.1. Every year, the Brandeis Book and Authors event brings a select group of award-winning and best-selling authors to Tucson to meet with readers and share wisdom about their craft. This year, an author who recently made the change from writing primarily for young readers will be a featured guest. Her name is Kirsten Miller, and her new novel, Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books, couldn't be more timely. It examines the impact that some of the most powerful books in history have on a small southern town, where many residents long for truth, while others would rather embrace a status quo of bigotry and misogyny.
Well, I knew I wanted to write a book about a little library that was filled with banned books. That was an idea that actually came from my editor. She asked me what I thought about it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And one of the things that I really was looking forward to doing was a bit of matchmaking. So putting the right book together with the person who needed to find it at the right moment. It's not the most realistic scenario of all time, but the truths behind it are very real. I think the theory behind book banning is that books are dangerous. In my experience, I've heard a lot more people talk about books saving their lives or being there when they needed them. So I wanted to have the people of a small town find the books that they needed to find and see what happened from there.
A recurring theme in your book is women being underestimated.
I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone that women are often underestimated in the work world and social world and the cultural world. But one of the things that I've been trying to do since I started writing 20 years ago for kids is sort of convince people that being underestimated, sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. If you are underestimated, that means that you always have the element of surprise working in your favor. It's a little bit of, mental jujitsu, I suppose, taking what's a perceived weakness and turning it into a strength. And I think it's something that I've tried to do in my own life, and it's something that I really want to encourage, other women to do as well, because I think that when they do not think that you're capable, you can surprise them. When they don't think that you're the one who's going to be, a real competitor, you can really sort of shock a lot of people. And I'd like to see more of that in the world.
Perhaps the opposite side of that coin is the title character Lula herself, who overestimates herself and is overestimated by others. You could say she is the prototypical Karen of modern society.
She's one of those people, and I think we all know them, who just never seem to have gotten enough attention and is willing to do whatever it takes to get the attention she thinks she deserves. And yeah, she thinks very highly of herself, and yet at the same time she's very human. It's she's a villain. There's no doubt about it. As we get to the end of the book, we realize why she is the way that she is. There's a story there too, and I think that's something that we all need to remember is that no matter how unlikable a character is, and there's probably a reason for them being that way.
The old axiom of you can't judge a book by its cover comes to mind so often in this book for me as a reader, because I thought, okay, this is going to be a Southern style comedy, maybe a comedy of manners. And before too long, I was reading about bigotry, racism, misogyny, some of the heaviest topics in our world, and unfortunately some of the timeliest topics, and how they're actually felt and lived in the experience of these characters.
It is very much in the Southern storytelling tradition. It's what I call technicolor. It's a little bit more than reality. And the characters are very eccentric, and, there's a lot of irreverent humor. But one of the things that I was really keen to do was write a book that people wanted to read. And I wanted to write a book that addressed very serious topics, but one that did not feel like it was lecturing anyone or pandering to anyone. And I think humor is a really, really powerful tool to use to sort of bring people into these worlds where you're going to be talking about very serious things and showing them some stuff that's going to get a bit ugly, but still keep them there and keep them entertained and keep them sort of involved in this world. So that was something that I did very consciously. Because I really wanted as many people as possible to read the book and to think about the kind of stuff, the kind of ideas that I was bringing forward in each of these chapters. And it does go some dark places, but I think most people are able to stick it out because there's a whole lot of sugar to help that medicine go down.
There's a whole lot of sugar on that peach pie. And hopefully, if you are an avid reader or were an avid reader, you're going to re-encounter one of these banned books, and it might have changed your life. Do you have a story for us, Kirsten, about how one of the books you featured is personally important to you?
All of them are important to me because, and you'll notice that there are a lot of young adult books that are mentioned, not just because young adult books are often some of the more banned books, but because I got my start in the young adult world. I started writing books for kids and for teenagers. And so I saw this coming down the pike. I saw the book banning sort of picking up steam because it was my friends and my colleagues in the young adult world who were impacted first. And so I chose a lot of these books because they were ones that I thought absolutely had to be on the shelves. There's a book called Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson, which is about rape. And the idea that somebody would pull that off of the shelf or call it pornography, just it hurts my soul to hear that, because so many people out there who need to find that book and need to read it. It talks about the subject very frankly. And, for someone who has been through an experience like that, I think it's an incredibly powerful book to read. So, yeah, I mean, they are all very important to me, but the young adult books really are, I think, the closest to my heart, because I know how important it is for kids to have access to books that talk about difficult subjects.
Librarians can be so brave. There's a great librarian character in your book.
Librarians are amazing people. I have not met a single horrible librarian. These are people who go to school to help other people find the information that they need, to connect people with the books and the media that's going to educate them or give them comfort or whatever it is that they're looking for. And these are not people who expected to find themselves on the front lines of culture war, and yet they are holding the line. If you have a chance, go thank your local librarian right now, because I have not met a single one who has not felt this crisis very, very personally and professionally, obviously. But it's a big part of their lives, and we're very, very lucky that they have turned out to be as tough as they are.
That was author Kirsten Miller talking about her book, Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books. Next week on March 13th, that's a Thursday, Miller will be a guest of the Tucson chapter of the Brandeis National Committee for their annual book and author luncheon, beginning at 9:15 a.m. at Skyline Country Club. She'll be joined by Miriam Ruth Black, the winner of the National Jewish Book Award for her novel Shana, Lisa Belkin, an award-winning newspaper journalist who wrote Genealogy of a Murder, and local star Elizabeth Camarillo Gutierrez, the author of the memoir My Side of the River. Proceeds from the event will benefit Sustaining the Mind, a Brandeis National Committee fund supporting a Brandeis University program that is researching cures for neurodegenerative diseases, including ALS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. You can find a link for reservations on the Arizona Spotlight page at azpm.org. Did William Shakespeare have anything to do with one of the most pernicious foreign species bird invasions in the history of the world? Tucsonan Mike Stark is the creative director at the Center for Biological Diversity. His new book is Starlings, The Curious Odyssey of a Most Hated Bird. With great heart and humor, it documents how this European bird has now fully occupied North America and every continent except Antarctica.
In some places around the world, starlings are seen as this great gift because they will eat insects that are a bother to farmers and other people trying to grow crops. But really, most of them are known as a nuisance around the world. And part of that is because of just their sheer numbers. They will overwhelm a city block or a neighborhood. They'll come in thousands or tens of thousands, sometimes appearing overnight, it feels like, and just suddenly you're invaded and infested with starlings. So in cities, they leave their droppings everywhere, and they're really loud, and they will drive away other native birds. And in rural areas, they'll descend on a orchard and eat every cherry they can find, or they'll come into these big cattle operations and eat food that's meant for the cows and other animals. So people just find them obnoxious. They feel like they're so loud, they're so cranky. That surely there can't be anything pleasant about them. But of course, I always know there's more to the story.
Is there any truth to the longstanding rumor that the writings of William Shakespeare helped to bring this invasive species to North America?
Gosh, it's a great story. I really wish it was true, but it's not. The story is that there was this rich guy in New York City who wanted every bird ever mentioned by Shakespeare to be present here in the United States. And it's one of those stories that is kooky enough that it gets passed along and has been for generations and generations. And I really wish it was there was some truth to it, but there really is nothing in the historical record to back it up. And the origin of that story looks like it came about in the 1940s with a magazine writer who had conflated a few facts when he was talking about the history of starlings in Central Park, and they had brought in a Shakespeare garden in Central Park, and also around the time that the starlings were brought in the late 1800s, there was a lot of talk about Shakespeare. They were trying to bring it back into the public realm a little bit more after the Civil War. And there had been a book that came out talking about every bird that had ever been mentioned by Shakespeare, some 300 or so birds. And so this, I think, poor writer in the 1940s conflated all these, few of these facts. But boy, you can tell right after that article came out, I think it was 1947, every story mentioned about starlings has this Shakespeare connection, just because it's such a illuminating, tale of folly.
An important portion of the beginning of your book talks about Eugene Schieffelin, who was a resident in New York City. He may have been part of that legend or the Shakespeare thing, but what was his actual role in starlings coming to the U.S.?
Yeah, Eugene Schieffelin was an interesting character. He was the seventh son of a businessman in Manhattan, and that family had been in New York City for generations. They ran a pharmaceutical business and other, had a mercantile and other things. Eugene never rose to the top of the masthead at the business, but he had other interests. So he was a painter. He was involved in a lot of the social clubs around town, but he was also very interested in birds. And around that time that Eugene was expressing his interest in birds in the 1860s and 70s, there was this kind of global movement called the acclimatization movement. And that movement, the basic idea was that as people moved around the globe and immigrated, they should have the animals from back home with them. And sometimes that meant livestock, but sometimes that also meant birds. For a lot of people, it was kind of a sentimental thing. They wanted to have the sounds. Eugene Schieffelin released about 200 starlings in Central Park in 1889 through 1891. And from those 200 or so starlings, those are the ones that really we believe are the ones that kind of took over North America from there.
I think, Mike, that something for modern readers to contend with is the idea that less than 200 years ago, people didn't really have a perception of the importance of an ecosystem. And so you see these people wanting to move species of animals, mammals and avians, just willy-nilly around the earth. To me, that was shocking, because I guess I've grown up under the teaching that ecosystems are important and that they're individual. Biomes are important.
Well, I'm glad we have grown up with that perception, which is correct, that we need to respect the natural ecosystems that here and exist. But, it was different back then. We had a very different relationship with nature, and especially in the Victorian times, where nature was great, but there was this idea that we could perfect it, and that nature couldn't be its most beautiful, its most productive, its most incredible without the hand of humans somehow coming in. And so that was really around the time of Schieffelin and his starlings. That was really I'm not sure it was quite the prevailing thought about nature, but certainly leading up to them, that's really where people were coming from. And there were naturalists at the time who were starting to really understand the importance of not tinkering with nature and the laws of unintended consequences and those kinds of things. But, really with Schieffelin and his movement, again, they were really about bringing the birds from home here, hearing the birds from home. So it was this very kind of human-centric concept in relation to nature, as opposed to what's in the natural world is great and perfected already.
But you say early in the book that if perhaps the scientists and naturalists had paid more attention to what was going on in Australia, they might have gotten a better grip on the situation.
Absolutely. One of the things that happened down there was, the introduction of rabbits in Australia, and they wanted something to hunt. I guess kangaroos and dingoes weren't going to be cutting it for the locals, and so they brought in bunnies, and of course the bunnies bred like bunnies. And that population got out of control, of course. Some places, like in New Zealand, they then had to bring in other animals to try to deal with the bunnies. And so they were bringing in weasels and stoats and other things. And so you have this great experiment of biological control just sort of metastasizing out of control. And suddenly you have all of these animals that didn't belong, one brought in to chase down another. And so, had they really looked closely at what was going on in Australia, they might have thought better of it.
There was an old woman that swallowed a spider.
Exactly.
Reading the book and finding out about how starlings became so invasive, I thought, oh, but surely here in the Sonoran Desert, we're protected. This is an unwelcoming biome. Has it helped us in regard to being invaded by starlings?
You would think. But really, and there are starlings here. And starlings are one of nature's great survivors. And so they are able to eat a lot of different kinds of food. They're able to adapt in a lot of different ways. There are starlings here. We see them all the time. There really is not an ecosystem that has not had starlings come into it and live at least for a short time. Starlings at this point, the European starling, which is the one here, they are now on all continents except for Antarctica. And this is a bird that started in Europe and parts of Asia, and really over the last 150 years has either been brought to these continents or just sort of naturally moved across the landscape. And they're now only behind sparrows in terms of the most numerous birds on the planet.
Mike Stark's book, Starlings, The Curious Odyssey of a Most Hated Bird, is published by Bison Books from the University of Nebraska Press. He will be part of a panel at the Tucson Festival of Books on Saturday, March 15th at 10 a.m., followed by a book signing at 1 p.m. We have links to the schedule on the Arizona Spotlight page at azpm.org. And thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. The assistant producer is Sophia Hammer. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.